Hello, YouTubers, Facebookers. Um, I feel like talking a little bit about my history as a guitar player. So maybe some of you guys and girls can maybe understand how things went, and that way maybe have a better opinion on flamenco or other styles, blues or jazz. Um, I was bilingual as a kid. I grew up speaking Spanish to my mom as the first language. So I was saying mainly all the words that you would say as a kid in Spanish, and I was learning English in school. So I was kind of homeschooled a little bit, which made for an interesting experience growing up. I kind of kept Spanish thoughts to myself, at when I was out playing at recess or in class. Sometimes I would accidentally start thinking in Spanish. And I know a lot of people get judged if they speak a different language, whether it's any other thing besides English. It's kind of like being ignorant or more of a fascist, because you're not paying attention to how the person thinks on a cultural level. You're kind of thinking more on a academic level, and you base everything off of textbooks, in the past, and how you relate with a teacher is not how I related with the students. And so I never really talked to anyone in Spanish when I went to Nativity of Our Lord. I spoke English the whole time, and then I would just go home and talk in Spanish almost the whole time. But even when I got older, I thought it was kind of still segregated. I mean, you had high school slang words like yo or what up, what da, kind of just stuff like that, where it was kind of just short term, really more of a simple way to start a conversation. But I still spoke Spanish when I was at home, and my classes at Cretin-Derham Hall were basically interesting when it came to the Spanish class, because I was understanding things more on a linguality instead of or verbally, in that you could say, instead of textbook or vocabulary, grammar, punctuation kind of stuff. But I still speak fluent Spanish because I kept talking with my mom. It kind of starts to become engraved into your brain, and which is interesting. But yeah, so that's kind of like something that gets overlooked with some people. And I just notice that some people will even use it to their advantage, which I can understand why you would do that, but I didn't like it too much because when I would have a conversation in Spanish, it was always real private, and if someone didn't understand, you all of a sudden have all these biases and weird dilemmas that can go on to the person that doesn't know. And that kind of happened sometimes. But you really can make a difference if you speak another language or know another culture, just because that can really open up how you view the world. Yeah, I'll talk about some of that here in a second. When I was growing up, I was into Blink-182, Sum 41, punk rock. I loved listening to that. That's kind of what started the whole guitar study. It was Fender Stratocaster, blue Fender Stratocaster that you could buy at like Guitar Center. And I was just learning power chords, really just loud, obnoxious, distortionated sounds. And I really thrived on that. I thought, oh, this is so fun, they really spoke to me. And every time I turned the music on, it was like therapeutical. Even when it's punk rock, it was interesting. I mean, you can go through some bad times, and then the moment you listen to it, you kind of feel like, what should I do when I'm feeling this way? And you can play a song, you play the song that you're learning or the song that you're listening to, and the lyrics really spoke out sometimes. But when you're listening to Blink-182, you can feel kind of like depressed or, lonely, because they kind of have a dark side to them. And I never quite understood that, because when music is happy and always fun sounding, it's usually because you're not really listening to the lyrics. You're more interested in just like how the instruments sound. So I didn't quite understand the lyrics yet, because I was just into like the whole like, loud scene where everyone kind of was having a good time. And they wrote some interesting songs when they were with Scott Rayner. I almost liked all of it, and I still do today. I almost nothing really stopped me from listening to them, and they were really inspirational. So I'm really glad that I found that. I don't know how I did, really. I just kind of listened to them, and the first thing that I wanted to do after was learn how to play that stuff. And then when I went to high school at Creighton, I kind of fell into a different category, more of genre that had to do with rap or harder rock. I was starting to mature as a musician, and I just started learning Led Zeppelin, Jimi Hendrix, Bob Marley, The Strokes. I was learning Pink Floyd, Red Hot Chili Peppers, and I was into all that. I thought, okay, so now if I know how to play that Blink-182 kind of stuff, I can probably play that. And I started evolving musically because I started understanding, all this music is not just, simple and plain. It can be more complicated. And listening to it I still love hearing rap songs, hard rock songs, meditative songs like Enya. I was into Enya too. Celtic, Irish bands, like stuff that came out of England, like the band Sex Pistols, or what are they called? Flogging Molly. Yeah, there was a lot of that that I just absorbed real quick for 4 years. And it was still all electric guitar then. I hadn't gotten into nylon. And I was jamming a lot with other guys. And they loved, I think, spending that time. We really enjoyed it when we could. And so to really know how to do the jamming and all that, you had to spend time with other musicians. And there was a music class at school, music appreciation. There was like audio classes where you could learn how to record. So I started to understand a little bit how to record stuff. But I hadn't really taken it that seriously yet. It was kind of like nonchalant, really more like can you just vibe off of this instead of taking it real seriously. And I went to college with all that kind of music that I just talked about, and I learned how to interact with other musicians there even. And I think I had a small heavy metal screamo phase. It didn't last very long. I kind of thought I'd be into it, but over this course of like a year, I stopped. It was too like hellish, like really angry and mad sounding, for me to really think that I was okay with it. But there were bands like Slipknot or Lamb of God, Trivium, and I spent a small time developing with that harmonically, and that was an interesting time where I started to get into the more advanced electric guitar stuff, and I was playing on a Schecter C1 Plus. And I thought I was, a hot shot. Like, for a while you think, oh, you're like the best guitar player ever, kind of ideology, which is good to have, but I was not quite understanding yet the theory behind the music, because it was more like who could come up with the best solo, and not quite who could come up with the best like composition. And then after I dropped out of college, I started studying classical guitar, flamenco. That led me to a few people, the Hausers. I was learning from them. I was learning from this guy named Pedro Cortez. I learned from some of the guys that were at Zarango. And it was hard. I did not get what I was doing very well. And I really disciplined myself to understand that in order for me to play music that's coming out from a different country, it's not going to take the same kind of feeling you get out of electric guitar, because, you know, you're playing stuff that's more intricate, melodic, and very rhythmic at times. So it took a long time for me to really start learning some of that. And I spent a lot of time researching on YouTube or on other sites where they had tablatures, because anyone can actually look at a tablature and kind of get it, because it's all numbers. So I was just learning from tabs. I can't actually read music, and I don't have a degree. So I was looking for an easy way out, sorta. But that's kind of how it works at first. You're looking at really complicated virtuosity, and you want to figure out how to do it. And if you have a lot of patience, it'll start getting to you and understanding that. You know, when I was learning that, I thought that if I just kept taking lessons from some of these guys, I would really just figure out how to do it. But to really understand what it was like, I think that I had to go to Spain and meet the actual players. And what I mean by that is authentic kind of stuff that, you know, you would kind of just get from going to a different country, because you're just gonna get a better idea of what it feels like, and it's hard to understand that, even because especially if you don't speak Spanish and you go to Spain, how are you really gonna understand what to say or what to learn, because you can't speak that language? So there's a slight disadvantage, and to all those students that were there when I went to Cordoba at the guitar festival, I'm hoping they can become the players they want to. Basically, there was one teacher teaching a whole class, and you know, you only spent an hour every day for a week, and you didn't quite learn much because the guy would talk the whole time, and so anyone who couldn't speak wasn't quite on the same page. So I kind of thrived a little bit there because I was understanding what Manolo Sanlúcar would say. There were some other guys that taught, but you know, it was classified as um, beginner, intermediate, and advanced. And I was going into the advanced section because I thought, okay, well, if I can speak Spanish, I might be able to do this. And it's partly true, I think. Even though music can be considered a universal language, um, you maybe can understand it even more if you speak it. Um, and that's kind of what I wouldn't get out of maybe um, going to um, like Russia or China and learning from some people there. There I wouldn't have no idea, what's going on. So I was kind of lucky in a sense. You could say that because I just spoke it, I was kind of uh, advancing at a better pace. But yeah, I met these players, and they're totally different in each individual way. So by learning their music, their compositions, I started understanding how they felt about their music, their ideas. Um, and interpreting music is hard because you're not the same person, so your fingers at an advanced level are going to have trouble. And so I dealt with um, calluses and blisters and stuff, and it was a lot of discipline. It was hardcore, you could say, because it took more than just a mental thing. It was physical, where to learn an interpretation, you weren't really in the mindset of originality. You wanted to take someone else's song and feel like you wrote it, which a lot of people would say that's kind of weird, but a lot of people do that so they can become advanced too. So it was kind of like evolutionizing, and mainly very theoretical, and I was just starting to understand that kind of stuff. And there was all these different keys that you could play in, and all these rhythmic patterns, 4/4, 6/8, 3/4, even 5/7. But they all spoke to me in a different way. So I really enjoyed going to Spain and learning to play their songs along with meeting them. That was really a breaking point in my life, because these people were so into it, and I was so far away that it was somewhat transcendental, very spiritual kind of feeling that I had. So some of those teachings were really interesting, like, reasons for why you would make a mistake. Whether that was because you were nervous, because you intentionally did it, or maybe because you didn't know what you were doing. There were all these reasons for why music can get to you emotionally, or audio interaction. So learning what they were saying was really important if you really wanted to know exactly what was going on with your body, your in your soul and your mind while playing. So if you really want to go to Spain and study or learn some of this, you can find a source through me, because I've listened to a bunch of them, and I've read a lot of books on it. I've really understood a little bit how they feel. They're all kind of different. And so I was understanding the postures and movements of fingers and stuff. That started to take place when I got back home, and when I went there again, I was there 2011, I think, 2012. It was interesting how many times I would go there and just learn this stuff and understand that. So once I did, I decided it was time to record some of this stuff. And recording was really hard because I didn't want to make a mistake. So I probably would, to do something in one take was a lot of patience, and you would have to record something over and over again until you got it right, which is true for almost all musicians. And so I understood a little bit how audio engineering works in a software program. So I was able to make all this stuff because I had the right tools. I had all of the things you would need to do it, so why not? And that's what kept me going was, well, I got a camera, I got a guitar, I got a nice microphone. So I started making those, and that was really cool to watch how I kind of developed. And the singing and dancing were interesting, and it still is, because every singer sounds different, and every dancer might dance differently. So if I just keep understanding how the other elements to music play in, I guess I might be able to play with those that are also involved in the flamenco or other genres. So spending a lot of time with other musicians is a really big deal. And I don't mean like touristically, I mean like privately, where you can really just have conversations and spend a lot of time playing and just enjoying life together. So I did do some of that at Zarango, and I also met another guy, Antonio, and we did some recordings, and that was really fun. But I'm sure, it'll just take more time for me to really learn the emotions that they're feeling too. Not just, virtuosity and advanced, which a lot of players can get caught up in. But now I'm finally getting into gypsy jazz, and the theory behind gypsy jazz is interesting too. And I'm taking some lessons to do that now. So I might just find exactly what I was looking for with music. It's gonna be a while till I really understand gypsy jazz, because that theory is totally different than flamenco too, and it's totally different than pentatonic theory, which is based on five modes. But all that stuff, it's kind of somewhat memory based, somewhat physical, because when you're learning these concepts that have to do with a different genre, some of that sticks with you because part of your musicality will keep you thriving in those areas. So yeah, I might not remember how to play, a Blink-182 song, but I remember most of the chords, because it was all just power chords and stuff. So I could really just go back and learn that. And flamenco, I forget some of it, and so I have to go back. But all this theory is finally coming to me, and I'm understanding it. And so, you can't quite advance much more than that. You will, mature as a musician eventually when you find out what you really want. So I could have stayed and played, really simple stuff and make it my goals. But I think that when you look at what you want out of being a musician, it's all about growing up and learning exactly what you felt like when you got older. And too bad, I wasn't around when Django Reinhardt was. Maybe, he passed down all his music to others, so I'm trying to do that too, so that future generations can learn what I have to offer. And I have so much respect for so many musicians that, I don't know what I would do if I had never discovered